Start the webinar. Good morning, good morning.
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 Good morning.
Welcome, welcome. We may be live right now, so let's say welcome to everyone on the webinar and welcome to everyone on Facebook. This is our town hall discussion. We are the Access Network. Access stands for the Association of Collaborative Communities Equipping Youth for STEAM Success. And so as a part of this organization, thought it would be a great platform and opportunity during Black History Month to showcase some of the research I've been working on prior to us launching Access Network. But it's just a great opportunity to bring this discussion to the Access Network as well as to the community. And so one of the goals of Access Network is to develop a platform or a coalition of faith-based and community organizations who are focused on improving the number of underrepresented and underserved students that enter into STEAM fields. So basically STEM, agriculture, while also integrating the arts and entrepreneurship. And so here at the Access Network, we also have our University Community Resource Center, and myself and Lydia are streaming live from the UCRC. And we also have some very, very special guests here with us, along with myself. Let me take a step back. We have the Dunbar research team that has joined us. And so there's members of the team. We're going to do introductions as well as community activists. So I just want to take a moment to just let you know who is Access and the Access Network and the whole goal for today. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to get started and go into our introductions for this morning. Really excited about this discussion today. It's been a long time coming. This is our Reclaim Dunbar Then and Now, Illuminating Black Voices in the Historic Dunbar Community discussion. And so our goal this morning is to have a discussion for about 90 minutes, and then we'll also rebroadcast the video recording of this morning later on tonight. And so if you have any questions, if you're part of the live webinar, we invite you to enter your questions in the chat. If you're watching us on Facebook, we invite you to enter your questions in the comments. We have Lydia Dobbins, our program manager for the Access Network, as well as she's one of the moderators today. She'll be capturing your questions, as well as if you're watching the replay, enter your questions in the comments and we'll be sure to also reply to your comments as well. So with that, let's get started with our topic. So for today, we're going to start off with our introductions. I'm going to give you an overview of the research study, a very brief overview. If you would like to read the entire research report, it is published online. We'll make sure to share that link with you. You'll get to hear from a couple of the participants who actually participated in the interviews. And then also you'll hear from community activists as well as community members that will share just their perceptions about the Dunbar community, their involvement in the community, and then we'll have a discussion about future aspirations for the Dunbar community. So let's get started with our introductions. So I'm going to stop sharing here so we can see these beautiful and handsome faces that we have here online with us. Let's start with, I'm going to start to my right. If you could just share your name. It just moved on me. Remica was to my right, now she's to my left. So Remica Adams, if you could start it, each person can just share your name, your role, and you'll share more about what you're doing in the community. So for now, your name and your role.
My name is Remica Adams. I'm a realtor with the Dam Run Group here in San Marcos. And I also co-own with my husband Soulful Creations, which is a food trailer that specializes in soul food and barbecue. And I love everything community.
Thank you. Okay, who's next? Let's go.
I'm Marilyn. I'm
Okay.
Marilyn Meriwether Johnson. I grew up in the Dunbar area, left after I got married, and my husband and I returned back to the area, and very active in my church, Jackson Chapel United Methodist Church, which is located in the area. So very concerned about what's going on in the Dunbar area and want to be a part of whatever change that it's, that's going to bring about community and the growth of that area.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, who's next? Pastor Jonathan? You're muted.
I'm muted, of course, but I'm Pastor Jonathan Banbury, and I'm the secretary and a part of the board of the Dunbar Heritage Association, which is an organization that is based on the work of Mr. Harvey Miller, the late Harvey Miller, who was part of the Bridge Builders organization back in the late 60s, early 70s, that helped to transform the Dunbar Negro School to the Dunbar Park and Recreation Center that we see today. So he started the organization back in 1999, and the work that we do right now is largely involved with cultural preservation and cultural heritage of, the cultural heritage that's part of the celebrations and the things that we do that are part of the community.
Awesome, thank you. Jordan?
Hi, good morning. My name is Jordan Buckley, and I'm here representing the San Marcos Cinema Club, which is a film society that we like to say that we care both about film and society. And several years ago, we did a lot of research about the history of cinema in San Marcos, and found that there is a huge overlap with white supremacy and the Ku Klux Klan in San Marcos with the showing of films in this community. And some of our research ended up in an exhibit at the Calaboose Museum 3 years ago. But I'm also here on behalf of Mano Amiga, which is a nonprofit that fights for racial justice, particularly within the criminal legal system.
Thank you. Dr. Westbrook.
Good morning. I'm Vanessa Westbrook, and I am a member of the Hays County Historical Commission. And under that commission, we have a subcommittee, which is the African American Heritage Committee. And we are looking at the holistic view of Hays County in regards to the African American perspective. So San Marcos, Buda, Kyle, Wimberley, Jipping Springs, all of the cities are involved in what we look at in regards to that African American perspective. And so I've been with the Historical Commission for almost 2 years now. This January, we actually added the African American Heritage Committee to the now 8 committees that are part of the HCHC. And our work involves looking at historical perspective. Right now, we're working on a project that's looking at Black-owned businesses 125 years going back, which means that, of course, the San Marcos area is a part of what we're looking at, but we're also looking at Black-owned businesses that were in other parts of Hays County that a lot of folks didn't really know about, because when they vanished, they vanished. And so we've been able to go back and find deeds and find owners and various folks who have contributed to the African American perspective. And of course, the Dunbar area is a big part of what we've been looking at thus far. So we're getting ready to get a exhibition at the historic courthouse prepared that we had planned on opening this month to go along with the other African American perspective on the Black History Month. But of course, we had a lot of issues. I guess y'all all know about those. So we're looking forward this summer to get that up and moving so that it'll be something that's a part of the community. And the exhibit will be in San Marcos at the historic courthouse. Glad to be here.
Okay, next, Dr. Sermiento.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Sermiento. I am a professor in the Department of Geography at Texas State. My research interests are broadly about the politics of urban development. And particularly, one of the things I'm interested in is the political usage of cultural heritage and memory. So I've been, Dr. Chate Ashford invited me onto this project, I guess, boy, a couple years ago at least now. And I've been really thrilled to be working with the community. We think of this, there's several of us in the geography department working on this research, and we think of this very much as a community-based project. So we are in the service of the community and happy to sort of do whatever the community thinks we can do to help them. And I guess we'll be talking more about that work a little bit this morning. Dr. Ashford will share some of those insights. I'm also, I'll just say quickly that I'm happy to see everyone here and to virtually meet a couple of y'all whose names I've heard for the last few years and have been wanting to meet. So this is really great to be here. Great to see everyone. Thanks.
All right, Dr. Miles.
Good morning. Yes, ditto on what Dr. Sermiento said. I've been a part of the team now for a couple of years, which seems time is weird, you know. It's been a fast couple of years. I have been involved in the project originally. I think I kind of got on board because I teach an environmental interpretation course. And so we were doing some community-based, I was looking to get the class to have a community-based component. And I knew that there were some colleagues doing this work, and I met Chate at a workshop, I think is how we first originally got in contact. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is such great work that's going on. And so I was very fortunate to be invited in to be a part of the team. And my students got to get some real great hands-on experience working with the community and doing some, you know, heritage work and trying to think about interpretation and how we utilize different cultural resources toward community building, basically. So that was really great. And since then, we've, you know, just moved forward with the project and done, you know, some interesting stuff that I've been very grateful to be a part of. And echoing Eric, you know, it's great to see these faces here. Some of you I've met in person, some of you I haven't, but I'm very pleased to meet / see you virtually. Everything is virtual these days. So yeah, I really appreciate Chate, you organizing this, and Lydia also for bringing us together and getting this all set up. So that's enough for me. I'm in the geography department as well. Maybe I didn't mention that.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there anyone else online that I can't see? I thought that I saw more participants. I think that's all of the speakers. We want to welcome you again, those who are participating on Zoom, those of you who are on Facebook Live. I am Dr. Chate, and my research, I did help facilitate this study, but the core of my research looks at what we call broadening participation of women of color and historically underrepresented minorities in STEAM, so STEM and agriculture, as well as entrepreneurship and the arts. And my whole, because I hear this question in the back of some of your heads, why is she involved in this kind of research if she's so focused on STEM? And so what I communicated in my research agenda, so basically why I do what I do, is when we talk about pathways into STEM for those who have been historically underrepresented, you cannot do that in absence, especially if you're talking about in the context of communities. You cannot do that in absence of understanding the contextual factors that have influenced I should say our, because I'm a product of it as well, have influenced who we are, where we come from. And so those contextual factors are important in informing any career pathway and any workforce or economic development effort. And so that's why I'm heavily involved as well. And then also the element of, in my research, we talk a lot about faith And when I sat down and talked with Black women who had attained PhD degrees in computing, they shared with me, and we both shared, because my undergraduate degree is in computer science. And I know I have another engineer here with us, Dr. Westbrook, as well. That faith is what helped us persevere through our academic studies. So that's the connection to this. And I have to always go back to the impetus for this project was birthed out of the restoration of the historic First Baptist Church project. And so if that project wasn't formed, this would not be here today. And so, as a part of that effort as well, we wanted to understand, what are the needs of the community. So I'm so grateful that, this going back to when that started back in 2017, that each one of you and new people who are on board as well have decided to be a part of this. And so as a part of this study, I want to get into the actual study itself. I'm not going to take much time because I want to leave enough time for the discussion, because you didn't come to hear me. You came to hear all of these panelists share their perceptions, and those who are on the ground and those who are from Dunbar. We want to make sure that we hear from them as well. And so in terms of the research, there were 3 emergent themes that came out of the research. So what was the research project? Basically, it was an oral history project. In my research predating back to my dissertation, I developed or reconceptualized, because it was existing concepts that were out there in terms of critical race theory and the notion of there being counter stories or counter life stories. With my dissertation, the method was the counter life her stories, because I interviewed Black women about their experiences in computing and their retrospective life experiences. But in this context, we interviewed residents, current residents, former residents, also those who are congregants of current churches within the Dunbar community. And we wanted to understand their retrospective experiences since, and it, as a part of the community, living in the community, as well as their perceptions about life in Dunbar since after the Civil War. And so that was our initial intent. We were able to interview 8 individuals that participated. We have one of our guests here today. She's going to share later. She was one of our participants, and thank you so much for being willing to share. We have not revealed the identities of those who participated, because due to the IRB process at Texas State, we said that we would only reveal their names if they gave us permission. And so, so that's the reason why, because we wanted our participants to be able to share freely their perceptions about life in Dunbar. And so the 3 main themes, and the questions that we basically asked them were, what were your high points? In terms of the context of living in the Dunbar community, what were your, first of all, your lived experiences in general that contributed to your life within this community from the time that you were born, if you were born in the Dunbar community or while you were living there, or if you left and came back, or if you're no longer living there. What were your high points within that community, your low points, your turning points? We asked about challenges or perceived failures that they may have experienced as a part of living in the community, as well as we asked them about their childhood memories, their adult memories. We asked them about as well just some of their ideologies. So in a life history study, we're really looking at the perceptions of that individual's lived experiences over a course of time. And so out of that, as we looked at the life histories or her stories, life stories of the 8 individuals that we interviewed, we found 3 emergent themes. And so, number 1, and these are ordered in terms of the responses that were most prevalent. And so, number 1, that there's a history of slavery and racism as a part of their lived experiences. In the parentheses there, those are the sub themes, and I'll share some quotes as well, briefly, that are associated with each theme. Again, if you want to read in the entirety our research report, it is published online, and we'll make sure that we share that with you. Number 2, the impact of environmental and social racism as it relates to flood relocation, gentrification, Black-owned businesses, government, and aid programs. And then number 3, rebuilding and restoring the community. Faith, sense of place, recommendations for revitalization. So those were our 3 emergent themes. And so the first sub-theme here is related to, under the theme of history of slavery and racism, number 1, slavery. And so just some of the highlights of what they discussed. No, I'm gonna read from the actual article. So I have the themes. I'm not sure if they're able to see this part of the PowerPoint here, but basically I just wanted to share at a high level in the PowerPoint, because I only have a limited amount of time, just those overarching themes. And then I want to read some quotes here to you from the actual research, because in this type of research, really, we are highlighting quotes from the stories, from those lived experiences of our participants. And so as it relates to the history of slavery, okay, I guess I'm not sharing any PowerPoint. My apologies. I thought I was sharing something. You don't see anything, do you? Okay, I understand why you asked me that question. I'm just going to town here. Okay.
I just figured, I thought you had some slides, so I was just.
I do, and I'm reading from them. Okay, so let me see if I can do this here. Okay, can you see that? Okay, wonderful. Okay.
Turn on the PowerPoint. Right now you have the whole thing, your notes and everything.
Okay, let me get to the PowerPoint. Thank you.
There you go.
All right, you can see it. Awesome. Okay, so these are the 3 emergent themes that I mentioned. And then the impact of environmental and social racism. And then number 3, rebuilding and restoring the community. So the first theme, history of slavery and racism. And so I'm gonna stop sharing because I wanna read from the actual notes here, the actual study. And so some discussed the community's historical connections to slavery. For example, Olivia stressed the self-sufficiency and freedom of generations of some neighborhood families. She said, true African-American history that I left because, okay, we didn't all come here as slaves. Some of us were slave owners. Some of us were born free. I'm an independent woman. Ancestral chart tracer, Olivia's research service. And I did research and had my own business. Started after college. Then I had clients that send me orders in from all around. I would go to the courthouse and do a lot of research at the courthouse. And they let me go through old files and everything. And we all lived together, races of people, poor races, because it was poor folks in all races. And so that's a snippet of one person's perception about the history of slavery and in terms of how not everyone that came into the community were slaves. Actually, she said, we didn't all come here as slaves. And so dating back to that predated the participants in the study. Another person said, even though there was a mixture, everybody knew their boundaries. And so they're talking about the mixture of individuals that lived in the community, that it wasn't just all Blacks that lived in the community during the time that they lived in Dunbar, but still there were boundaries that were present. Molly said, no, I do not think there was ever any slavery here. I think that volunteers could be brought to San Marcos to build houses for the people. And so Molly actually was not a resident of San Marcos. She was one of the oldest participants in the study. And so she was sharing her perception, and she was actively involved with helping to rebuild homes within San Marcos after there was a lot of flooding. And so she was instrumental in that. And she remembered there being these 3 different communities in terms of where the Blacks lived and the Hispanics lived, and then where the whites lived. And she was trying to help bring them together, but she didn't recall there ever being slavery. Now that's her perception as well. And then others shared more about their experiences at Dunbar. And so in terms of prior to the integration of schools, they shared about segregation. So stories of segregation that emerged from their experiences. They recalled how there were different aspects that related to their experiences. For example, Olivia remembered that Dunbar was known for being Black. And Dunbar, talking about the Dunbar School, that used to be called Colored Town, or Dunbar in general, was Colored Town. And then Molly described learning about segregation and racial division through signage and social landmarks. She said, no people allowed. No Black people allowed. I don't know, as a child, when we'd be driving someplace, I would see a sign, and when we would get into the town, I don't remember what I called them. And anyway, it said no Black people allowed. And I asked my mother, why does it say that? And she just said, well, it's just the way it is. She never explained. And well, you know, I like to know reasons for things and why things are like they are. And my mother, I don't know if she thought about it or just didn't think a child would understand or what, but she just said, it's just the way it is. And so then when we came here and we were like, wait, there's Black people, there's brown people here, but they're all living in different communities. So that helped us to understand more about the dynamics of the different communities. And so we recognized that there were different time spans in which different individuals that we interviewed lived in the community because they were of different ages, but going back to the time frame of there being these 3 distinct different communities, that quote helped to really verify that information. And then I'm going to move on to the next section because I recognize we don't have as much time as I would like to go over all of this, and it's all so very good. I want to share a quote here from the gentrification area. And so under this quote, Meredith described the current integration and gentrification of the community. She said, yeah, because she actually lived in this house, a shotgun house down here on the corner. And I think when I first came back and I drove by there and I seen a white person, I was like, no, it can't be, because that's Miss Sanso's house. Miss Sanso's house. That's where what we have noticed is that these homes that were occupied by nothing but Black people are now Hispanics or whites coming in. Very few Black people left. Very few Blacks who are living in the area. I know that some have moved out and gotten larger homes, you know, and whatever. What was the up and coming neighborhood where the Blacks were? Not that it was all Blacks, it just that they started building homes over there. And so that gives us some indication about how things begin to shift and change and when the gentrification began to happen as well. And so, and then also, I wanted to share something from the Black-owned businesses section. And so, on the other hand, there was neighborhood flight and in-migration that benefited some Black-owned businesses. Robert shared how Black-owned businesses were essential because as a segregated community, Black neighbors had to do things for themselves and one another. They were an important fixture and landmark for the community. Down the street at the end of MLK Drive on the right, where the telephone company is, from that point all the way back to the Black Baptist Church was 2-story and 3-story buildings that was all Black businesses. It was pool halls, barbershops, domino shacks. And then across the street on the corner where that building sits, where it was once the Dairy Queen, that sitting right there was a Black service station owned by Blacks. And then right up there on Endicott, on the corner right, up there was all Black hotels owned by Blacks. Then the stores up here, we had our own Black stores. We had everything. This neighborhood was all Black only. And so, and then also there's stories of land ownership and they shared about the family businesses that they had. They also talked about government and aid programs and how, despite segregation policies, how the area flourished until after World War II. And so because of the GI Bills and the VA loans, that allowed residents to move into the suburbs and other aid programs that helped to change the dynamics of the neighborhood as well. Gary Job Corps was a big employer during that time as well, and contributed to the government and aid programs that were being offered. And then finally, they talked about rebuilding and restoring the community and how there's a desire for community beautification, restoration, rebuilding, and recognition of possibly and promise for the Dunbar community. And so 5 of the 8 participants that we interviewed, they talked about how they want to see the Dunbar community recognized in the future in terms of its history, and how the church represents the haven it had for the community in Dunbar, and that the churches represented a constant union for city members. It was a site of gathering, education, and resources. Churches reinforced a sense of place and faith for community members. And so they shared their experiences based on their connection to faith, but also based on their connection to their families as well. Laura said, I still attended Jackson Chapel, United Methodist Church. I still came to church. Meredith said she taught at San Marcos Baptist Academy. She said, you can, when you finish that one, you can come back and get another book. So she talked about the influence of one of her mentors sharing that experience as well. And so there's so much great stuff here. I just want to end on the note of just some of the conclusions before we open up the discussion. So overall, you know, our study revealed just the counter life stories are the lived experiences of our residents and congregants in the historically African-American Dunbar neighborhood after the Civil War. And the whole goal of this study was to counter the master narrative or the majoritarian perspective about the lived experiences of African Americans in Dunbar and overall in San Marcos, because Dunbar is a part of San Marcos as a whole. And so as we look at how overall, although there were some recollection of slavery, some recollection of segregation and the integration of schools, our study is not an inclusive study of all of the history that has taken place. But we believe that what we have found are some indicators that help connect some of the disjointed stories that we have. And so as we continue to move forward, we can continue to build upon what we've learned through other efforts that are taking place. And so we're really excited about continuing this conversation with our community activists and community members that are a part of this discussion. So at this time, I want to turn the floor over to my colleagues to help in moderating our discussion about your perceptions of this research, as well as your perceptions about the future of the Dunbar neighborhood.
Great, thank you, Shate. I believe that's my cue.
Yes.
That was an excellent overview. Thanks, Shate. It was nice to revisit what we've done so far. And before we launch into the panel discussion here, I'll just add that we were just about to, we had done a series of community meetings as well. Some of you all participated in those. I can't remember how many we did, maybe somewhere around four to six, somewhere in that range. Those were super interesting. We had great turnout for those, all kinds of people from the community and beyond coming out to participate and share their thoughts. And one of the things that came out of those meetings was the desire to do what we called an assets and needs survey, community assets and needs survey. So we wrote up the survey. We were just about to go out and go door to door and knock on every door in the neighborhood and try to get folks to complete the survey. And then, of course, the pandemic arrived right at that moment. So that has been on hold, but we are thinking that we're going to go ahead and try that again, doing more of an online approach, just leaving flyers on people's doors and see if what kind of response rate we can get with an online approach. So that's coming up soon. And so the research is moving forward. We feel like in some ways we're just getting started. So we will be very happy to hear more from the community about what they want, or what you all want, I should say, for community members from us as researchers, because as far as we're concerned, like I said earlier, the purpose of doing this research for us is really to serve the community. So this kind of panel that we're launching into now is really great, as it gives us the rare opportunity as researchers to hear directly from the folks that we've been working with and that we hope to continue working with. So let me pull up, we've got a few questions here for this segment. And so was Ralph not able to join us this morning? Or is he here and I'm just not seeing him?
I don't see him.
Okay, so Marilyn, I think this might be a panel of one here. It's nice to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us. And I will pose these questions to you and we can maybe just have a bit of a conversation revisiting the interview that we did. Boy, that was probably almost 2 years ago as well, I think, this summer. So my first question for you, I'm sort of jostling between screens here. Marilyn, is we certainly appreciate you working with us on this project. It would be, from a research perspective, we would have nothing without folks like yourself who are willing to dedicate time to participate and open up and share your story. So my first question is, why did you choose to share your Dunbar story with us on the project?
Well, it was an opportunity to share about a community in which I was raised. I obviously am going to age myself. I was born in 1948, brought up on Mitchell Street. They are in the Dunbar area. And it was an opportunity to share the closeness, the protectiveness that we had in that community. You know, it takes a village to raise a child, and that was certainly what we had in that community. If you went walking down the street and you were caught doing something that people knew that your parents would object to, then you became that person's child at that particular point, and they certainly wouldn't hesitate to go back home, beat you home, as a matter of fact, and let your parents know what they had observed. And so we all knew what the consequences of that would be. So it was a nurturing place to grow up. It had its limitations. Obviously, I attended the colored school, as it was called at that time, until 6th grade. When we moved on, I think integration started about 1954, 1955. I just did a presentation to the Retired Teachers Association of San Marcos, and the year came up. But at any rate, our parents encouraged us to get an education. I attended Texas State, or Southwest Texas, started in 1966, and I believe it was integrated in 1962 by 5 women who grew up in that community, except for one, Dana Smith, who came out of Austin, but had her roots in San Marcos, and she still presently lives in San Marcos. So at the time I attended Texas State, there were only 6 Afro-Americans that were there. So some of the things that Shantae was recalling, it predated me because I didn't remember a lot of the stores that she talked about. I remember the filling station that was on the corner, ran by Mr. Johns, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, one of the streets in the Dunbar area is named after him. I remember there was a store on the corner, and we had our own beauty shop and things like that, and just one owner. But I know that you must have interviewed people who predated me, which would take you back for quite a while. But like I said, being born there and raised in that community, and it was a place where our parents protected us. You know, if they told you you were not supposed to go in a certain area, that was absolutely the limitations, and nothing above San Antonio Street, even though my mother did do some housekeeping up there. But you were told, and it was just built into you, what your limitations were in terms of moving about in the community. Now, in terms of them telling us what we can do, they always encourage us to go to college. And fortunately, I believe a majority, all of us in my family, Ralph went on to become a UEW leader, and I have a brother who's a lawyer, my sister a pharmacist, and other brothers that attended, college, because we were encouraged by our parents that this was going to be the way that we were going to be able to do better for ourselves. And I like to explain that my father was one generation out of slavery. In fact, my great-grandmother, who I knew, was born in slavery. And so they were, not that they weren't smart. My dad was the smartest person that I knew, along with my mother. That common sense that it took to survive. But because at that particular time, there were no schools that allowed the Blacks to go beyond probably the 6th grade. And so you have the starting of, if they were going to continue, they were going to have to leave and go to a boarding school. And so this is how you got your historical Black colleges started, and so on. So my memory of Jackson Chapel, growing up in the church, and if you haven't seen the PBS special that it was on, it is a fantastic history of the Black church in the Afro-American culture. And I certainly felt that I could identify with everything that they were saying in there, that it was a place where Black people could go and they had the spiritual support, and they could be called Mr. or Mrs. and not by their first name, because they knew once they left that, now they became Joe, or now they became whoever, you know. But there we garnered that respect. We called them, we gave them, you know, they have their titles, and still to this day, it's very difficult for me. I see it's a current trend for people to call their pastors by their first names. And, you know, that was just not, the pastor of the church was the spiritual leader. And that was a place where you had your your civil rights organizations would come and would meet. So I don't want to prolong and not give other people an opportunity to speak as well. But those are my memories of growing up in that community, is the support, the love, the protection that they gave to those who lived. They were there if to babysit or do whatever needed to be done. So I have good memories. I do have some that were not so pleasant, but that's because of the times in which we lived. I actually experienced as a little child going to Hilburn's pharmacy. Can see it to this day, and being with someone, and they had, at that time, they had the sandwich shop and the soda and so on. And I asked the person that I was with if I could get an ice cream cone. And when I turned to ask for one, I was told, you cannot be served here. So I will never forget that, because I don't understand, you know, as a child, I'm a human being, why I have to be denied having an ice cream cone like everybody else. And then being in the schools and knowing that many of the books that we had, those were secondhand books. They came to us and so we weren't privy to getting, you know, the first books. We were getting handoffs. That's okay, because let me tell you, we had some of the best Black teachers that I have ever. I'm a teacher. I taught for 40 years, and I can remember those teachers like it was day and night. They were committed to their students, to teaching them. They were a part of the community. They knew your family, and they were in constant contact with them. I won't forget that education, because when we did integrate, we weren't behind. We might have been way ahead. So I really appreciate the education that I received coming through at that time, the San Marcos Colored School, because I know what dedication is like. And that inspired me, that as a teacher, how important it was to encourage my students, to be the example for them. And that was certainly what I experienced growing up in the Dunbar district.
Great, thank you so much for those comments, Marilyn. Those touch on so many of the themes that came out through the interviews that we were fortunate to conduct. Shate, thanks for sharing the link to that PBS documentary that Marilyn mentioned. I agree, that's an excellent one. I've been enjoying that. I also want to give a plug for another great recent PBS documentary about Ellis Hazlitt called Mr. Soul that just came out. It's about him and the show Soul from New York in the late 60s and early 70s. Very cool documentary. So Marilyn, one of the big things that I was thinking about when you were talking was sort of one of the challenges of doing critical anti-racist type of research. And that is basically trying to balance the importance of what you started out talking about, which is a more positive representation of African-American experience and culture compared to what we often see in the media. We talk a little bit about this in the article that we published, trying to balance that with the desire to not shy away from being critical of racist conditions and structures. So you really touched on both of those things in your response. And I wonder if maybe that anticipates the next question I have for you. And thank you, Lydia, for sharing the Mr. Soul link as well in the chat. If anyone's interested, check that out. So Marilyn, my next question is, why was it beneficial to participate in the study for you?
Well, my roots are still in that community. I go to church at Jackson Chapel United Methodist Church. There are 5 churches that are located on that one street, Center Street. It's ironic that it's called Center Street, but that was the, the center of the activities. And it's important that we not forget where we came from. And Jackson Chapel was an integral part of my spiritual growth. And it's important to give back to the community what it gave to me. And when Shantae was mentioning about going back through that community, I was gone for 40 years before I returned. And it was really shocking to drive down the street, and a lot of the homes that when I left, I knew were occupied by Black residents. And now I'm saying, oh, that's Mr. So-and-so's house. So watching it change, and I'm not saying for the worse, I'm not saying that. Everything has to change. And so to be a part, that our history is not forgotten. And the people who lived in that community, they were integral part of all of San Marcos. And to think back that before the schools were integrated in the college, my dad paid taxes in that town, as well as the other citizens. He was a big landowner. Why would we be deprived, his children, be deprived and anybody else of having good facilities for them to go to school? Now, what they meant for evil turned out for good because, like I said, we got a A1 class education from our teachers. Many of them, probably all of them, were graduates of historical Beck colleges because a lot of schools weren't integrated at the time. So it was important for me to let people know about the history of that little community, that it is not forgotten. San Marcos is built on the backs of those people because I know where they worked. I know where my mother worked. I know what my father did. So we cannot forget the influence that they had in that community and how they helped build that town. That college, those people who worked and cleaned those dorm rooms were my church members. They were members in our community. So how else was that college? That college survived. And of course it helped the community because the people worked there. But it's very important that we not forget our history and the impact that we had on that town alone.
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn. Those are really powerful comments, and I couldn't agree more. I know Jordan wrote a great piece a while back arguing about the need to recover the lost history of African-American folks in San Marcos, going all the way back to the beginning of the town's founding, right? I mean, your comment, Marilyn, about who built this town, if you go back to the so-called slave schedules from 1850 and 1860, in 1850, some of you all probably know, there were somewhere around 100, 150 enslaved people here. By 1860, there were more like 800. So in that crucial time when, this area was being colonized, essentially, Black folks were doing probably most of the labor at the time. And that has been erased from the historical record. So I really appreciate you joining this project, Marilyn. And I totally agree that that's one of the things we hope to accomplish here. So I hope we've done that. It looks like we need to move on to the next segment. I'm hearing from Shantae. So I'll just say, our third question was going to be, what do you hope the Reclaim Dunbar project will accomplish? And I think that, that actually is sort of the theme that's going to be taken up in the next segment. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to our friend and colleague, Dr. Miles.
Hi, I'm seeing in the chat that some people are noting that maybe Eric's sound went out, but I'll just recap the last little bit that he said there. So he was saying that we're just going to transition to the next segment, which is actually a great transition from where we just were, which was the concluding question from that section was, how do you hope the Reclaim Dunbar project will, or what do you hope it will accomplish, what this research will accomplish for the community? And so that's what we're going to talk about next, is sort of the current activities going on in the Dunbar community and what our hopes and vision for that is, I think. And so for our panelists here, we have, as we've seen, we have Pastor Jonifa here, and Remica, and Jordan, and Dr. Westbrook. Ralph, I guess Meriwether has not been able to join us today, and Marilyn, of course, is here. Thank you for sharing those great comments with us. Did I miss anybody else? Oh, somebody saying they can, somebody else has lost their
I can still hear.
audio.
Like Marilyn can't hear us.
Ah, okay. Shall I just forge ahead and we'll try to get Marilyn sorted out?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. All right. So Lydia says she's working on it. All right. So basically these questions that I'm going to ask are for anybody, really. We're all here to have a conversation, I think, to build on what we've done previously and to think about what we can do moving forward. As Eric said at the beginning, this is a community-based effort. We are here to work with all of you to do the things that you think are important and to try to provide any assistance or work together in various ways. And so you all are the stars of the show. So I guess the first question that I'll just pose to the group and see who wants to jump out and speak on it is, what is your response to the findings that you've seen, both the great summary that Dr. Chate gave at the beginning, and also if you've had a chance to look at the published results, the published article, and how have things evolved over time in the Dunbar community? And so I guess basically your responses to what we've presented, and then if each of you maybe wants to share a little bit about your activity in the neighborhood, in the community, and how we think we can move forward from that, and overall kind of what the value of doing this kind of work is. So that's sort of our big picture of what we want to be talking about for now. So I'm not sure if I think people might want to spontaneously speak, but I can call on people if you feel like that would like that would help. But let's see who wants to volunteer to speak first.
So what's the first question?
Yeah, I gave you the sort of overview there. The first question, I guess, would be, do you have any responses to what you've heard today, or to, if you were able to, read what was published, and and then, your responses to it and how you would love to see things move forward.
Okay, well, I'll go first. And hopefully I'm not jumping further into the next segments by some of my answers, but my response to the research is that it does what I think it set out to do, which is give voice to the things that have happened over time in the Dunbar community, because you hear members of the community and people that know the history and are part of the history, they talk about it, but when you cement it in research, that is exceptionally important, and it is very empowering in a way that maybe the members of the community didn't have the access to be able to cement their experiences in something like a published paper. So my response to that is that I'm grateful for the research. I'm grateful that Dr. Chate and the people that were part of the research team were able to collect what was left, to collect what is left, because there's so many cultural assets, meaning the people, and some of the artifacts, the buildings that are being lost over time to gentrification and out migration of the neighborhood into different areas. So, but for those who remember, and for those who are still here, like Marilyn was saying earlier, you leave and you come back and you see these different things that have happened, and you wonder what can be done about it. So it's important for the research, because the research grounds the justification for being able to move forward and to do something more important, because research affects policy. Without research, without that academic scholarly work to say, this is what we found, and this is how we can move forward, then it's difficult for people to be able to go to, community level politics and be able to ask for changes to be made. Because if you say, this is what I'm experiencing, they'll say, no, you're not. We don't see it. No, it's easy to dismiss just one person, but when you have research, it's hard to ignore when you have the research that shows the findings. So that's my response.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Does anyone else want to share any responses maybe to the research and about what's currently going on with a vision, with an eye toward the future?
Well, I'd like to say,
oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll go ahead.
I was just, with the fact that we have the pandemic and going on, being able to get it out and let the community see your work, that's very important. So how are you going to be able to make this available to the people in the community, or people who might be interested? And if you address that, I'm sorry, I lost all contact with you just a few minutes ago. So if I'm asking something that you covered, I apologize. But if it's written, as the pastor just said, Joffrey just said, how are we going to get it out there for people to see, to make it known to the community? Because there are a lot of people coming into San Marcos, they don't know the history of the Dunbar district. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't grow up there and you're just coming into town, you might just see Dunbar district and San Antonio district, but you don't know the history of that. Mm-hmm. To know, once you hit San Antonio Street, that was the marking word. Blocks didn't move unless you were working in that area. So how do we make this history known and everybody can have access to it?
Those are really, really great points, Marilyn. Thank you for that. And I think that what we're doing today is part of that effort of trying to bring out these findings and share them with people. And we're recording it, and it's going on Facebook, but also the recording, I believe, will be posted to YouTube. So please, please, please share what we're doing today once we've concluded for the day. But yeah, I think those are great things to be thinking about. And I think the concluding portion of the day will be more concretely what our action steps will be. So if you have ideas about how we can make sure to spread this information, then you are very correct, Marilyn, that is an important part. And I believe Dr. Westbrook was going to say something a few moments ago. So.
Yep, I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of, you got multiple things going on here. Two things I wanted to say. One was, as what Marilyn just said in regards to getting information out. We know that June, we're going to be celebrating Juneteenth. And as this month with Black History Month, we did a variety of things during the course of the month of February, that perhaps maybe June might be something we can look to perhaps doing another panel discussion, maybe in real time with people in an audience, because all of this will be behind us, maybe not. But maybe that's a month to, again, look at doing a presentation of, Dunbar now and then. And so that folks could come out and actually participate in a panel discussion, or either see some kind of event so that they could be, as Marilyn said, reminded about what Dunbar is. Because true enough, you go to San Marcos and you see designated areas, but if you have no frame of reference, you don't know what that means. It just look like real pretty little signs that go throughout San Marcos. That was the one thing I wanted to say. The other thing was that I wanted to bring up something too in regards to the businesses that were discussed in the Dunbar neighborhood, and where you were allowed to go and not allowed to go per se, depending on the color of your skin. It was interesting also to note that if you were African American and you may have had limitations on where you could and couldn't go, it wasn't necessarily that way if you happen to be someone of the white persuasion. You could kind of go in and out wherever you wanted. And the reason why I bring that up is because one of the famous folks in that area of Dunbar was Mr. Cephas and his blacksmith shop. which started off as a blacksmith shop in the 1880s, but he switched over to becoming automotive because of the change of the times. And he was known as the best person in the county, period, no matter what color he was, where you could go to get work done for either your horse and buggy or for your car around the turn of the century. And so if you were asked, where do I go get this fixed? You were told to go see Mr. Cephas. And not only was he in blacksmith as well as in doing automotive stuff, he was also known as an engineer of his time for some of the things that he had done in order to help the health community. And so if you happen to be someone who was not African American, you could kind of go in and out of the neighborhood because you wanted to find the best person to work on what you needed to have done. But that didn't necessarily was retroactive the other way around. You had to stay in your neighborhood if you were of the African American persuasion. So I kind of wanted to bring that up a little bit, that it was easy to move around if you were of the white persuasion, but not so much if you were of the African American persuasion. So think about how knowing that the best person in the county to do this kind of work was a Black man. And that's not the first thing you said when you talked about Cephas. You said, oh, he's the Black man. You said, no, he was the blacksmith, period. So I just kind of wanted to bring it up. And he wasn't the only one. There were other folks in the area who were known for their meticulous detail in what they did and the types of services that they provided, that they were the first person that you went to seek to help you because they were the best in the business. And color didn't have anything to do with it. It was who was the best in the business. But then again, if you look at it from the other perspective, you kind of had to stay where you were depending on who you were. So I just kind of wanted to point that out a little bit, that that was something that's very important to talk about. And that's just not here. That's, that's everywhere, is that there were a lot of people left during Black History Month, of course, that were left out of the books, the history books, because of their the way that they had a unique service that they could provide, but they weren't given credit for that, and they should. And so I could give you 15, 20 names of people who were prominent professionals in their fields. They were Black and they served everybody, and everybody knew it regardless of the color of your skin. So I just wanted to bring up those two little points.
Yeah, thank you. That was really informative and interesting. Thank you for that. And that's a great suggestion that you are leading toward as we conclude up our session, talking about what to do moving forward. The Juneteenth target to shoot for, to have maybe another session like this, to maybe have it in person if we if the world allows it, but to get more people listening, more people in the room, literally or figuratively, to move this forward. So those are great suggestions and really great reminders about prominent professionals regardless of their skin color, right? And that they're examples of that are very important, that we should continue to prop up and keep in mind. So does maybe Remica or Jordan have anything they would like to add to that kind of overall topic we're talking about here, which is responses maybe to the research so far, things that are going on currently, and then that kind of thinking, moving into that discussion about actual next steps that we might want to take?
I guess I could comment. Yeah, I mean, some of the research that I've done, I thought dovetails pretty interestingly with what I think is a fantastic compendium of interviews, and I'm hearing from people's lived experiences in Dunbar. A lot of the research that we've done initially through the San Marcos Cinema Club is just looking at the history of white supremacy within San Marcos specifically, and kind of the prominent figures within San Marcos who were Ku Klux Klan members or who were otherwise white supremacists. And one publication I would highly recommend people to take a look at is the Deathbed Memoir of Walter Buckner. This was written in 1978. It's available at the public library. And Mr. Buckner, his family ran the San Marcos Daily Record for the better part of the 20th century. They purchased it in 1921 when KKK activity was kind of at its height here in San Marcos, and they sold it in 1975. And in his deathbed memoir in 1978, he writes, and I quote, "Not everybody will admit to having been a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I was. I had my hood and my robe, and I was proud. I make no apology now for my membership and activity, however insignificant." So this is the family that that ran the San Marcos Daily Record for 54 years. up into the mid 70s, and he was unapologetically a Klansman until his last days. And that's in the library. The other one is looking at Mr. Zimmerman, who, was the mayor in the 1950s, and for whom is the only civic leader that we have a monument in downtown San Marcos across from the historic courthouse. Mr. Zimmerman, when he was asked by the Daily Record back in the day why he opened the first movie theater in San Marcos, he credited Birth of a Nation. And if you look at the Daily Record in the early 20s, 1921, 1922, there was an article about the Ku Klux Klan pretty much every week, or an advertisement taken out by the Ku Klux Klan, including their Go to Church campaign, where they tried to encourage people to attend Protestant congregations. But in 1924, Mr. Zimmerman hosted a Ku Klux Klan Day at the movie theater, at the Palace Theater downtown. And as part of that screening, they showed 2 reels of footage from the recent KKK statewide gathering. An article in the Daily Record said, "Klan picture coming." Dr. Westbrook referenced Mr. Cephas, and also just the importance of Juneteenth. And I just want to highlight that a few years after, well, actually the same year that they had Ku Klux Klan Day at the movie theater is when 20,000 Klansmen converged in San Marcos for the statewide gathering. In that same year, on Juneteenth, Mr. Cephas led the San Marcos Independent Band in a celebration of Juneteenth. So, that same year that you have literally 20,000 white supremacists converging in the community, Mr. Cephas has the courage, along with others, to nonetheless celebrate their pride and who they are. And I just think it really speaks to the resilience of the community in Dunbar, but also the leadership of Mr. Cephas and others of that period that, given this widespread white supremacist stranglehold on the local politics, both in our, the publication as well as who's serving in office, you still nonetheless see, just really amazing accomplishments and achievements being, transpiring within the Dunbar neighborhood. So I really just give a lot of credit to the research that's been done. Something else that I didn't know about was the amount of fires that took place in the Dunbar neighborhood. That was new research to me that was uncovered through these interviews. I recently went to EJI's headquarters, Brian Stevenson's organization, and it was noteworthy to me that Hays County doesn't record a single lynching in the history books. But I think a lot of that has to do with who's been in control of our history here in Hays County, and which history gets told and which gets ignored, or when you bring it up, the gatekeepers of local history don't want to talk about that history. And so it just seems amazing to me that if the Ku Klux Klan burnt down First Baptist Church, if every county that borders Hays County has multiple lynchings recorded, how is it that there was allegedly never a lynching in Hays County, given the prominence of white supremacy within our elected leadership and as well as the local publications? So anyways, I just really celebrate the work that was done by this group, and I look forward to more scholarship forthcoming as a result.
Wow, Jordan, thank you. That was very interesting and informative history and background that I was not aware of myself. So that is sad and interesting. And I really hope that we can continue to, like we mentioned, highlight this and make sure that these histories are being told and not getting buried. There's incongruities between the kind of official record versus the real experiences that we have narratives about that we can document, and like someone said earlier, I believe it was Marilyn, saying that once you make it real, once you get it down on paper, it becomes much more tangible, and so that's really important. So thank you for sharing that information. Remica has said that her internet is kind of going in and out. If you are on at the moment, Remica, do you have any responses to the research and any comments you'd like to make? And if you're still waffling with that, we can sort of move into the next section and you can pop in when you're ready. But let's see if Remica can speak.
I think okay.
Good.
For me, I guess to piggyback or mimic off of what everyone else has said, for me, the research was just mind-boggling in the sense that being new or being a transplant to San Marcos and want to get involved in the African-American community, serving a community and finding very little opportunities to do so, hearing the stories about how the community once thrived and kind of operated off its own was fascinating to me. So hearing those stories, going back, walking the community sometimes with Chate, being able to see monuments or landmarks that were once big buildings or whatever, for me, the research was eye-opening in that sense because one, as a local business owner, a Black business owner, and a female business owner, I had no idea that the community was thriving the way it was, but it also gives me courage and momentum to move forward. Another thing for me, everyone knows I'm a very sociable person. So it also gave me opportunity to connect with a lot of these trailblazers like Marilyn and Georgia and Ollie and all those people as well. So I feel like they were able to pour something in me to help me learn how to move forward. So for the research for me was just fascinating, phenomenal, and once again, eye-opening.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your comments, Remica, and your participation and leadership in the community, all the great work you do. And so I think that was a great segue into our sort of concluding part of the conversation. So I'll turn it over to Chate, Dr. Chate. I know we don't have a ton of time left, but I'm sure that Chate will guide us right on through.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miles, and everyone that's spoken. And really, we've already addressed all of the final questions that we had. So we just need to wrap this up. And when I say that, I'm not saying that we're wrapping it up because it's over. I'm saying that because it's just beginning. Did you hear all of the nuggets that were given, not just by the Dunbar quote unquote research team, but by the community members? Each one of you have hit parts of this overall historical account of the Dunbar community, of African Americans' presence and lived experiences, not only in San Marcos, but also in Hays County. I'm honored to have each one of you on this panel. I know Dr. Westbrook, you mentioned that you're leading the efforts with the African American Heritage Committee, and also some of the phenomenal research that you've done already on Black businesses. I just want to throw something out here on the table. I want to get your input as we prepare to close out. But I believe that if we all were to come together and share this information with one another, I definitely welcome the opportunity for us to have another in-person panel in June. I think that would be great. But we all have pieces of this puzzle. We need to put the puzzle together. We don't have to lead it. We just want to come alongside and be a part of it, because we also have a part. If you know, the analogy in the Bible about having a one body but many parts. No part is more significant than the other, but we all have a piece of this. And so we only had 8 interviews. And so in life history research, in-depth understanding of a person's lived experiences is valuable, but we can't by any means generalize our findings to say that these represent all of the experiences of those who lived in Dunbar over a particular period of time. And so this is just the beginning. We would like to interview more. The benefit of us all partnering together is that through Texas State, we've already gotten the approval for the Institutional Review Board research. We could very easily add any community member to that IRB. You would just have to go through the city training. It's basically training for when you're conducting research with what they call human subjects. We like to call participants. And so I just want to throw that out on the table. And so any other comments about other ways and actions that we can take? So one that's been calculated, or offered, was doing this again in person and widening the participation of this. I'm throwing out there a collaboration between and expanding the reach of this team, and whether it's through the Hayes County Historical Commission. We're just here as servants to support. I don't want to see this die, these efforts die, and I want to continue along the line of continuing to bolster our findings, because as Dr. Pastor Jonathan, as Pastor Jonathan shared, in terms of research and being able to drive policy and to drive change. We're better together in that. So let me stop talking, because I'm gonna start preaching here in a moment. But just want to throw that on the table. What are your thoughts about that, or any additional ways that we can collaborate in order to really utilize these tools and resources to drive change?
So one of the things that it's come to my attention, and I'm like Remica, and it's funny because I keep saying I'm not from here, but I've been here for 20 plus years, going on 30 years now. So I'm as much a part of the fabric of the community as those who come before. And I found that many people that have made so many wonderful contributions, like my grandfather-in-law, Mr. Miller, he came from Georgetown, but he came here in 1966 and began to work for Gary Job Corps. He started the Bridge Builders, which was an organization that was committed to bringing people of different ethnic groups together to foster conversations and dialogue. And because it was on the heels of the death of Martin Luther King. So, that was the work that he was doing then, and it kind of lives on in what we're doing with the Dunbar Heritage Association. And it's so important to continue these conversations and to continue these efforts, because you see the community dwindling and you see it dying. And it's become, like I said, I've become aware of the fact that the way that the Dunbar district is drawn out now in terms of its historical value, the buildings, that we know Center Street is a huge part of the community for Black people then, and it still is now. It remains as one of the still living artifacts of people that are still working and living and worshiping and building community in that neighborhood, but yet I'm not sure if it's actually considered part of the Dunbar district. So, we need the research, and we need the power behind the research team and the efforts of people in the community to widen the span of what the Dunbar district actually is in terms of its current boundaries. Because as far as I know, the boundaries are really narrowly drawn, and the only reason why we still have certain buildings that are protected, like the Dunbar Recreation Center and the First Baptist Historic Church, is because of the historical markers that are there. But the actual lines of what Dunbar is in terms of the history of it, it was done by outside entities and approved, over time. And so it's so important for us to continue this work and to be noisy, to make our voices heard, so that we can actually revitalize the area in a way that best serves the interest of those that still live there, while preserving the memory of those who have worked before to make Dunbar what it is. So, that's what I see moving forward, is that there's continued effort and work in that. So I'll stop there, because I could say more, but I'll stop there. So if somebody else.
I agree with you, Jennifer, because for me, lately, just having difficult conversations, stop avoiding the conversations of racism and gentrification and we can go on and on and on about all the problems in any community, any area, but not coming to the table and talking about them with you, that moving forward, we all need to have further conversations. I think my internet went out again.
It did. Yeah. You're back though.
We heard you though.
Yeah,
you froze up though.
Yeah. I would like to add also that as we take a look at the focus of the Dunbar area, it's the last area still in existence in Hayes County in regards to the African American experience. The Anacott area is gone, practically, other than two historical monuments and the cemetery. The Peyton Colony, which is closer to the Wembley area, is gone. So there were several huge areas where we had thriving uh, businesses and communities set up around the African American perspective. Kyle had one also. They're all gone now. There's bits and pieces of them left, but not the way that we still have what's intact in the Dunbar area. And you all are even saying that it's slowly starting to get smaller. And so we have to do whatever we can to not only keep the Dunbar thriving and moving so that people know what happened, what's going on now, and those boundaries can be established. But even as from a county perspective, which I'm always looking at, is getting the story out about some of these others, which we don't have anymore. They're gone. If someone was to say Anacott area, you would say, well, what's that? Well, that's the old Black Colony Road that's off of 1626, which used to be a thriving area, which now has a cemetery, a church that's not working, and two historical monuments, and that's it. That's all there is of it. And then Peyton Colony, which doesn't exist anymore. And then there was an area that where the outlet mall used to be. That was an area also, which is also now gone. So I think what we need to do is do whatever we can to keep this area moving and keep this area in everyone's foresight so that we can see what's there, what we can do to enhance it, perhaps, what we can do to keep the story moving, because it's the last one of its kind in our county. I don't know if you all even knew that. That's the only one that's left now.
I agree. I think the conversation needs to continue. I agree with everyone that has spoken about how important it is that we let the people know what this area of San Marcos at that time called the colored part of town, not lose the fact that they played, those individuals who lived there played an integral part in building San Marcos. They were the workforce. And we don't want to resolve to just having a single monument. You know, my husband and I travel all over and we go to see this used to be. And what is used to be is nothing but a monument with a few words. It's still there. We need to see what we can do to preserve it. My experience is different from my sister's experience because there was 7 years difference. Then I have a younger brother whose memory is, you know, he has a lot to add. Unless we start capturing these memories, it's going to be lost because these people, we're not going to be here. So we have to have that written documentation like Dr. Johnfrey was talking about. And in order to maybe get financial support, grants, or whatever, we're going to have something to stand on. And we're going to have to show how important it is to keep this alive. Yes, is there going to be change? It's going to be change. And I appreciate all of those of you who've come into the community after I left, who are continuing like Remica, like Dr. Johnfrey, and all of you who are participating in this. And Dr. Vanessa, you had a name that I was not familiar with at all. And so I want to look out and do some research. What did you call this, the area that you mentioned? I can't hear you, you're on mute.
I'm sorry.
What was
it Peyton Colony? The one in
yeah,
Wembley?
Peyton Colony. I had not heard about that. So I'll have to get some more research because I know there's still people who are living in the community. And I think we gave the names of those to you guys, Dr. Shante, to interview those. You still have Rose Brooks, who is actively working in our community and lived in the Dunbar area. So as many of those people that you can reach out to help to support and give you their perspective on what it was like growing up in that particular, you know, from as far as they can remember. Because all I can do is give you what I experienced. And then I left, and I've been was gone for almost 40 years before returning. So I certainly can see the difference. We still got those 5 churches there. And as I drive down the street, not many of them have changed. The people inside have changed, but the buildings haven't necessarily changed. So I really wish that we do continue the conversation, would like to be a part of it. So thank you so much for the opportunity to participate. I appreciate everybody's input. It's been fantastic.
And this
I'd like
has
to
been
say,
great. We're over time. So this is the, what you call it, the after party. But final words. Pastor Jonathan, you had some final words that you wanted to share?
Okay, so I'll be brief. Final
Okay.
words. So one of the things that the Dunbar Heritage Association is involved in is preserving the intangible cultural heritage, such as the traditions, the values, and the beliefs of the African American community through celebrating things like Black History Month, MLK. We have a multicultural MLK celebration and march that we do every year that everybody in the community gets an opportunity to participate. We did an online Juneteenth celebration last year, which people that had never heard and didn't know the history of Juneteenth got a chance to participate and learn about it. So, you know, through these types of cultural preservation activities that the Dunbar Heritage Association is involved in, you know, we can filter through and help people to remember that we were a people, we still are a people, and that we have values that we can share and pass on to the next generation. So I just wanted to share that.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you to each one of you who have participated on this panel. There's so much valuable information that was shared. And so we're definitely looking forward to continuing the conversation, continuing the research as well. I also want to give a caveat that this research is not inclusive of all of the information and all of the history. And so I see this as the word concrete was used earlier. This is a snapshot as we continue to put in more of the pieces into this research and gather that information. We can continue to add to it to ensure that we have the most accurate account as possible. We want to fill in those gaps. And so we'll continue this conversation. Again, if you have any questions in response to our town hall discussion today, feel free to post them if you're on Facebook in the comments. Also, you can email us directly at accesswithany@gmail.com, ACCEYSS@gmail.com. And we'll be sure to share those with all of the panelists. And then also be looking for more communication about future conversations and discussions. So again, thank you very much for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.